So let's talk about certification and what it is. Our certification program is portfolio based. So that means you are building a body of evidence to present to reviewers to look at to demonstrate the skills that you have. So you don't necessarily need any coursework or anything like that. You're building from your previous work. And I will say our process is fairly open in terms of what you can include and how you demonstrate those skills. You just need to pay attention to the competencies that you're trying to demonstrate. Those competencies all come from the NAAEE or the North American Association for Environmental Education Guidelines for Excellence in Professional Development of Environmental Educators. Those were built with input from over 2,000 educators and go through a revision process often. And they really build the framework for what certification is and what it looks like. Colorado then took those guidelines and built them into a Colorado set of guidelines that then turned into 5 different themes that you'll be demonstrating. And we'll talk more about that. There are multiple levels of certification, and we're actually working on one more level as we speak. But today we're going to focus on 2 levels of certification. We're not going to talk today about our apprentice level of certification, which would be for teens or very early college students just getting started and is really cohort based and based out of an organization rather than being self-paced like the 2 levels we're going to talk about. But if you want to talk more about that, please give me a ring, shoot me an email. We can talk more about what that looks like. The 2 levels we're going to talk about today are the certified level and the master certified level. If we think about the big differences between those, as I mentioned, we have 5 themes. And at the certified level, you have to show understanding in each theme. At the master level, you need to show mastery of each individual competency under that theme. So it's much more detailed. There are a lot more areas that you need to show evidence of, beefier. And I would say the 2 big content differences are in the certified level. You don't necessarily have to have developed your own EE materials, written your own lesson plans from scratch, programs, that sort of thing. Whereas in the master level, you do. You have to present something that you've written and created. The other big difference is in assessment and evaluation. In the certified level, you need to understand why that's important. What are some strategies around that? But in the master level, you do need to demonstrate that you can, from start to finish, put together an EE program evaluation. So that includes coming up with the questions, the data collection methods, the analyzing the data, and making decisions based on that data. So those would be, I say, the biggest differences. And then there are a lot of little differences along the way. The certification program started back in 2005 with the development of those Colorado Environmental Education Guidelines. The program was piloted for the first time in 2008. So getting us today where we have well over 200 certified environmental educators in the state, which is exciting. For those of you who may or may not stay in Colorado, I did want to just mention that our program is accredited by the North American Association for Environmental Education. So those are the green states on the map are accredited. And what that means is if you achieve the master level of certification, that's recognized nationally. The states in blue also offer certification programs. There are about 15 in the country that have a program. And we do accept applicants from states that don't have programs if they're not available in their state. So, a lot of you mentioned some really good reasons about why to get certified. Certification can demonstrate your knowledge and skills in environmental literacy. It is something that you can put on your resume and use to demonstrate your skill. I would say the biggest reason, though, to participate is really about your own professional development. And this is a different kind of professional development than attending a training. Because what you're doing is you're collecting evidence that demonstrates skills, but along the way, you're reflecting about those skills and telling us why that's important. And that reflection process, at least for me, and I think what we've heard from other folks, is a really valuable piece for your own professional growth because you can really think about, hey, there's this thing that I do, but I don't intentionally think about it every day. But oh yeah, that's why I do that. That's why it's a good practice. Or hey, there is this skill that I could actually beef up and think about more in my own practice. So I think when you're looking at whether or not to pursue this certification, I think really thinking about your own professional development is an important part of it. So, what kinds of things will you need to demonstrate through the certification process? These are the things you will need to show evidence of. 5 themes. The first one is environmental literacy, and that's really about your own environmental literacy. What are the things that you know and are able to do that then eventually you will be teaching, but do you have a good background in them? The second is foundations of environmental education. Do you understand the field, some of the characteristics and goals of environmental education? Do you understand the professional responsibilities of environmental educators and what you should be doing to maintain and continue to grow as an EE professional? The fourth theme is really the beefiest one in the whole portfolio, planning and implementing EE. So that's everything from your actual teaching practice, putting together lesson plans, putting together programs, or whatever that looks like in your settings and context. And it does look different for different folks. And demonstrating why you do the things that you do. The fifth one is the one where we have the most hiccups, I will say, and that's assessment and evaluation. And I do just want to call out that many times when we're speaking about evaluation, we use these terms interchangeably. But in certification, we're actually meaning them differently. These are two different things that you're demonstrating through the certification process. Assessment is really about learner assessment. How do I know that a learner is understanding the information that we're going through in the program? Whereas program evaluation is really about how is the program working the way it's supposed to work? Is the program having the impact that we expected that it would have? And looking at the program as a whole. You might use a collection of learner assessments for a program evaluation, but they're two different things that often work together. So in your portfolio, you will need to demonstrate that you know the difference between those two things. What I'd like to do is spend just a little bit of time exploring these. And so if you use your phone or pop up on your computer, use that URL there, tinyurl.com/CAEE cert. that will take you to a screen that has the competencies from certification on it. So I am going to pop that up on my screen. Well, let me let you make sure you get it first. So on that screen, you'll see a grid with 6 boxes on the screen. 5 of those cards that you'll see on the screen are colored, and they correlate with the theme. So put one of the colored themes in each box on your screen, and then try to match the other cards that list the competencies with the theme that they go with. And this isn't necessarily to get the right answer, it's just to spend a little time playing with and thinking about what those things you'll have to demonstrate are. Some of them could live in multiple boxes, so we had to pick a box that they lived in, but there aren't necessarily right or wrong answers to this. This is just a get to know and play with it a little bit. So spend a couple of minutes rearranging and organizing those competencies. Take about one more minute, and then it's okay if you don't get finished. We'll start talking about each of these. Right. Let's go ahead and get started and talk a little bit about each theme and how you might actually show evidence for some of these pieces. So, environmental literacy, the themes that or the competencies that we put in this bucket, and again, you could make a case for them living in another bucket too, are things like knowledge of environmental processes and systems. Most often, what we give for evidence of knowledge of environmental processes and systems are things like papers from college courses that talk through an environmental system or process, transcripts that show different or lists of courses that you've taken that might show that you have an educational background in knowledge of environmental processes and systems. It could be professional developments that you've engaged in. Um, Lots of different ways to showcase your background knowledge. Processes of addressing environmental issues, I will say most frequently the evidence that we get there is some sort of an essay or a write-up on an environmental issue. What I would say is where a lot of people trip up on that one is they do a really great job of exploring the environmental problem, how the problem affects environmental systems, but they don't necessarily talk about the social side of the issue and what do different stakeholders think should be done about the issue and what their values are that influence what solutions might work for them. So make sure that you address both sides of that when you're looking at an environmental issue. Personal and civic responsibility is, could be volunteer work that you do, could be an essay about environmental actions that you take. We've had some people do things like take the quiz about how many planet Earths they would need to sustain themselves and write a reflection about that. But any way that you can describe how you personally and civically live out your environmental literacy works great. And questioning, analysis, and interpretation skills, most people submit something that demonstrates that they know how to look at evidence and know whether sources are trustworthy or not, using research to back up uh, their processes of addressing environmental issues, things like that. And I will say, you can submit one piece of evidence for all of those things potentially if you think really carefully about how to put that together. So you necessarily need a piece of evidence for every competency. Theme two is another one where I think we mostly see essays in this one, but it doesn't mean that's the only things that you can submit. We do want to know that you understand the fundamental characteristics and goals of environmental education, and they're slightly different when you look at different sources and different foundational documents. So, uh, we like to know a little bit about your own ideas about what goals resonate most with you, but making sure that you cite where those came from and what work in the field you're building from. Knowledge of environmental processes or environmental materials and resources. Most frequently, folks will evaluate a resource against the guidelines for excellence and demonstrate, where they see strengths and weaknesses of a resource. Um, but there are other ways to do that as well. The evolution of the field of environmental education, you only really need to include that if you're doing the master level, not the certified level, but showing a little history to the field and what you're pulling into it. And then how environmental education is implemented is really thinking about partnerships, how you're collaborating with other folks in the field, where you're getting resources or other organizations that you might be using to help support your practice, are all great things to include. Theme three, most frequently when we look at ongoing learning and professional development, folks will write an essay and explain what they've gotten from a professional development that they participated and think about how that has changed their practice. Folks will sometimes submit certificates from different professional development that they've attended. Our reviewers really rely heavily on the reflection part. They really want to know the whys behind some of the things you do and how it changes your practice. And that's not just true for this theme, it's true for every theme. So really think about your reflection and how these things play out for you. And then exemplary environmental education practice, I will say most frequently evidence we get for that are things like letters of recommendation. You do need to submit a signed code of ethics as part of your portfolio. It could be a peer evaluation or a supervisor evaluation that someone did for you, but most frequently we like to see some sort of external something that shows what your practice looks like. Like I said, theme 4 is the beefiest theme. So you can include a lot in here. We do recommend that you include at least 2 programs, lesson plans, whatever that outlines, whatever that looks like in your context, so we can see how you put things together, along with a reflection that talks about some of these competencies like knowledge of various teaching methods. Why did you choose the teaching methods that you chose in the lesson plan? Or could you have incorporated something different to engage different types of learning? Planning for instruction, that's all about those goals and objectives. Do your goals and objectives match the activities that you're doing? Do they line up? Looking at knowledge about learners and learning. What you know about your learners, how did that play out in the lesson plan? Sometimes it's really helpful to talk about one time that you taught it, what happened. And I will say it's tempting to really talk about the times that things went really well, but it's actually easier for reviewers to evaluate and see how you made changes. So talking about things that didn't go so well actually is really helpful for reviewers. So just keep that in mind as you're reflecting. And things like a climate for learning about and exploring the environment. What are the safety considerations you need to keep in mind? How do you make sure learners feel safe answering questions? Those types of things. And then how do you think about the different hats you wear, both as an educator and as an advocate? Both are important roles. They are different in how we present information. And so generally that's a reflection on how you kind of suss out those different hats and how you make sure that we're teaching learners how to think, not what to think. So generally folks submit an essay or a reflection on that one. Finally, assessment and evaluation. Oh, let me go back before we jump into assessment and evaluation. Theme 4 is also where we see folks submit videos sometimes as evidence, or other mediums that might showcase your teaching strategies, teaching tools, that sort of thing. With videos, I would say a couple of keys. Reviewers probably aren't going to have time to watch a full 2-hour program. So pick a chunk that's going to showcase a competency that you want to display. Tell reviewers where to start and where to end that shows the competency. You want it to be long enough that they can actually see it play out, but short enough that they're not going to start missing things because there's just a lot to get through. Jumping to assessment and evaluation, we want to see assessment that's part of instruction. And so how are you using informal instruction as part of your programming? We want to see that your learner outcomes match how you're assessing. How do your objectives match up with those assessment tools that you're using? We definitely want to see reflection on how you use both assessment and evaluation to improve your program. Generally, that's submitted as a reflection. And then For the master level, we do want to see a full program evaluation or a plan for program evaluation that walks through all the steps from developing the questions, picking out the data collection tools, evaluating the data, and then what changes were made. That can also be an evaluation report that falls in there. Again, I would say the majority of things that we receive are written materials, but that doesn't mean you don't have to do that. We do get some artistic renditions of some of these things sometimes. One time we got a Boston Marathon race card time was included in a portfolio. And while that didn't match up specifically with any of the competencies, for theme 3, it shows persistence. It shows taking steps to reach a goal. And so you can be creative and include things in your portfolio that maybe won't hit on all the things of a competency, but might help enhance it, or might be things that you want to use when you present your portfolio to an employer in the future, or however you might use your portfolio in the future. We want it to be something that works for you. Any questions about types of evidence that might show up? Let's see, we have a question about, is it the way we assess and evaluate our students on our own programming? Generally, yes. If you did evaluation for another program, you could certainly submit that for sure. But generally, folks are providing details from their own programming. I'm just scanning through the chat to see if there's any other questions here. Beth asked, as a sustainability programmer for a district, what ideas do you have for evaluations? I think there's a lot of different ways you could approach that. I'm guessing, Beth, you offer programming or professional development for teachers in your district. You could evaluate how that professional development is working. You could evaluate teacher engagement and participation in the overall program. If there is a course that teachers are teaching that applies to sustainability, you could do a program evaluation of that course for sure. Lots of great options, I think. Awesome. So we talked about this as we were on the screen, so I'm going to skip ahead here. Here's just a slide, and we'll send these slides out afterwards of different evidence that folks have contributed. And you can see visuals. We've talked about most of these different types of evidence. Observation reports from teaching, finished or end products, publications, if you write articles for a newsletter that goes out to the folks you serve, brochures or signage that you've created that demonstrates a competency can be used, all kinds of different things. And there are things that are not on this list that could be used as well. So feel free to keep popping questions in the chat about the evidence, or you can also feel free to interrupt and we can answer any of those questions. But I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about the process for certification. On our website, there's a page that walks through the process. The first thing we'd invite you to do is to submit an interest form. And let's see, Betsy, I'll go back for you for just a second, but I'll send these out so you can have them. All right. If you didn't get all that, I'll make sure you get it in the follow-up. When you submit an interest form online, all that does is tell us that you're starting to think about it, and that will help us send you reminders of deadlines or anything relevant that might be coming up, that sort of thing. Portfolio development happens largely on your own. It can take as long as you need to put things together. I generally recommend that if it's something you really want to do, to try and complete it in a year. If it takes longer than that, I think sometimes it gets harder to complete. So I recommend kind of blocking it out within a year to do it. But on our end, there's no time limit for your portfolio development. Once your portfolio is complete, you will submit that portfolio using a form on the website and pay the fee, which I have in another slide so you can see what those are. And then your portfolio will get reviewed by 3 different reviewers. We know that this is a subjective process. Sometimes we get portfolios that are 20 pages long, and sometimes they are 200 pages long. And so it is totally possible that a reviewer might miss something. So that's why we make sure that 3 people are reviewing them every time. And so that we can talk to each other and make sure that if one person picks something up that someone didn't, that conversation happens. And then once that is, reviewers will score those portfolios individually, and then we'll come together for a conversation and you'll be notified. You'll either be notified that you met all of the requirements or that you need to submit additional evidence. You're never not certified, but you could be asked to submit additional evidence. Anytime that you're trying to pack all these competencies into a portfolio, it's possible that reviewers missed something. It's possible that it was there, but they just need to see a little bit more to make sure that it's in the mastery level. And you can resubmit as many times as you need to, and we'll support you through that process until you get there. Like I said, we have 3 reviewers. They have a conversation after they score the portfolios individually. Usually takes us about 3 months from the portfolio deadline to when you get the reviews for us to give them enough time to review what is sometimes 100+ pages of documents, to schedule those meetings and then pile all the results. So expect that it does take a little while. When you're looking at the rubric, it is very tempting to rely on this column here on the right side, this suggested response. But what I really recommend that everyone does when they're looking at the rubric, you can see at the very top, the theme is listed. And then in that second yellow highlighted area is that the competency that you're demonstrating. And in this column that says master, that's what describes what reviewers are looking for. So that's the column that you really want to pay attention to and identify whether the evidence that you submit includes all of the things in that list of that 3rd column. So definitely keep an eye. That's the most important part of the rubric. You'll notice here at the bottom that there is a box that you can actually fill out this rubric and submit it with your portfolio. It's not a requirement, but often we recommend it because portfolios do get pretty long sometimes. The more clear you can make it for where reviewers can find information, the easier it is for them to evaluate. So, this is a nice place where you can say, here are the pieces of evidence that might help you see this competency and where those are. And that can be really helpful for reviewers. You can also do that in other ways. Some folks have a table of contents or will have a little description before each piece of evidence that says, here's the competency that I'm meeting with this. Any of those ways work. But if there is no roadmap or no way to tell for you to tell us which competency you think we're meeting, sometimes we'll look at a piece of evidence and put it towards one competency when it actually could have been used for multiple or something like that. So knowing your thinking there is really, really helpful. The certified rubric looks very similar. You will see the difference in this rubric. When you look at the competencies, the columns are not connected to each individual competency. They're connected to the theme as a whole. So even if a competency is listed on this left-hand column, you don't necessarily have to provide evidence for every single one. In the certified rubric, you're really focusing on meeting at least what is in this adequate column in the middle here that looks at the theme as a whole or this target column. Again, the suggested response is to give you some ideas of what other people have submitted that could look like, but that's not what it has to look like. And your main focus should be on what's in that adequate or target column. For fees, the certified portfolio is generally much smaller, so the cost is lower. It's $60 for a member to apply for certification, $100 for a non-member. If you take our online course, and our online course is not specifically line by line aligned with the rubric, but all the assignments from the online course can be used to submit for evidence. So you still have to put the portfolio together and submit it, but you can use those assignments as your evidence. If you went through the course, there's no additional fee to submit. The master level is $200 for members, $240 for non-members. And if you participated in that online course, there's just a $50 additional fee. We do ask that everyone recertify every 7 years. In that process, you submit information about professional development you've attended. You have to demonstrate 56 hours of professional development and a reflection on how your practice has improved and grown over the last seven years. And there's a $35 cost to keep that certification current. So last few comments, and then I'll open it up for questions. But remember again that this is your professional portfolio. So make it what you need it, as well as looking at the rubric. But we want you to be able to use this. It is a significant amount of work. So if you can use it to showcase your skills to a potential employer or use it in another way, that's great. Don't reinvent the wheel. You can use evidence that you wrote in another state. You can use evidence that you wrote 20 years ago. As long as it meets the competencies, you can use what is already in your body of work. And I totally nerd out on this stuff. So if you want to talk about anything, have individual questions, want to talk through what might work for evidence, you can always reach out to me. and I'm happy to have those conversations. Couple resources that you can tap into. There is a really great book on kind of the background of EE called Across the Spectrum. I'll make sure everybody gets a link to that. Um, there is the online course. We offer that every January through March that walks through and has assignments that are aligned with the evidence in the portfolio. You can always look directly at the guidelines for excellence in environmental education, and NAAEE has a lot of really great online modules that you can check out on kind of what is EE if you want to dig into theme 2, the history of EE. Um, they have a module on research and evaluation as well as equity and inclusion. So those are all really great resources to tap into. Here's my contact information, and I will leave this up for a sec, but I would love to just open it up. Feel free to unmute yourself and let me know what questions you have or what did I miss from your earlier questions. Glenny's, did I say that right?
You did. Hi, Katie.
Hi.
I'm sorry. I have a little one in the background, so if you can hear him, I apologize.
No
Um,
worries.
and mine wasn't necessarily a question that I asked in the chat, but I just wanted clarification on if this was, or I guess a little bit more guidance on deciding if this is the best route for me. So
Sure.
I currently work for, or I currently manage an AmeriCorps program, and it is on environmental stewardship and energy. So I just want to know if I can, if you believe that this would be a good fit to kind of tie in what I'm doing for this program and some of the educational materials and the lesson plans that we're providing to our audience would be something that I can connect back and use it here. Or do you think it would be beneficial for me to just um, kind of use prior experience, maybe not any type of like AmeriCorps work?
I, if you do decide to go for certification, I think you could definitely use evidence from your work supporting the AmeriCorps program. If you offer trainings for your AmeriCorps program, I could see those being something you could evaluate for theme 5 or something you could submit as a program in theme 4 and talk about how you designed those. Um, what's age appropriate for an adult learner who's an AmeriCorps member or a teen who's an AmeriCorps member. So you could definitely use those things as evidence, depending on, not knowing the range of activities that you do with your AmeriCorps program. You might need to pull from other experiences as well with
Mhm.
evidence. But my guess is you could use a lot from the program.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Katie.
Yeah, absolutely. Question in the chat about deadlines. So we have a mid-April deadline and we have a mid-August deadline every year. The dates change just a little bit every year, but always mid-April, always mid-August. You can submit your portfolio anytime. Just know that that review process won't start until that portfolio deadline is when we send them out to reviewers. We find that reviewers are more accurate and calibrated with their reviews when they review more than one. So we like to do them having each reviewer review at least 3 portfolios rather than kind of as they come in, if that makes sense. And also asked about the online course. The online course has already started. It runs January through March every year. And the
I
fee
just
for
have a
that is about
question.
$150. It's a 10-week course.
I did have a question about some AmeriCorps stuff. I know that for the cohort that I'm in, we gather data on like all the groups that we got and like whether or not they said that they learned something. There's like a couple different categories. I'm wondering if that could count towards the number 5 sort of evaluation thing. Like, I guess I'm confused on if it's my own evaluation of my work or like evaluating students or yeah.
You're either gonna for I'm guessing that you're gonna be submitting at the certified level, or will you be submitting at the master level?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna do the certified.
At the certified level, absolutely. You can take what you've put together from your AmeriCorps term and reflect on that and think and how you're using that data to inform your practice. You can also use for the certified level how you're doing informal evaluation within the program. So that could be questioning strategies um, or games you play that tell you, are students getting what I'm talking about, or are they not getting what I'm talking about? And reflecting on, hey, there was this one time that I realized all the students weren't getting it because I used these questioning strategies. And I realized we need to make a pivot, and here's how I pivoted. That would be a great reflection to include.
Okay, thank you.
Katie, I have a
Yeah.
question. Thank you again for the wonderful explanation. As always, it's so great seeing your beautiful face.
Me too.
I have a question. So, in the evaluation, because I'm not specifically, and you answered that perfect earlier, not working with the students, I am helping implement, but I'm not um, seeing the actual uh, the student evaluations. Could I use data to back that up? For instance, waste diversion as a simple uh, subject. You know, if we're implementing a composting program and things like that, can I use that waste diversion saying that yes, this implementation did work and have increased their diversion rate? Is that something that will work for that?
Very possibly. I think the thing you'd want to make sure is that in those evaluation, does that data answer all of your evaluation questions? So you're going to be kind of identifying what those evaluation questions were. And some questions that data will answer wonderfully. Um, you might have more than one question, and so might need to use multiple forms of evidence or forms of data in some evaluations. It really depends on what those questions are, but does that type of data work? Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, great. I've got some ideas, so that'll work out. Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other
Thank you, Katie.
questions?
This has been very informative.
Awesome. Well, again, my email is director@caee.org. I'll send out these slides, a copy of the rubrics, links to a couple of those resources that were in there, as well as the recording in the next couple of days or so. So watch for that and don't hesitate to reach out if you have more questions. And if we can help you in the process, excited to have you all here and be thinking about certification.